Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about the recent TFT drama. I'm going to give you a very short synopsis. I will talk about the problems that I have with the current way that we interact with trading. And at the end, I also want to go into some solutions that I think GG could implement basically next league immediately that could already alleviate round about 90-ish% of the reliance on something like TFT. Now, if you're not as much of a degen as me or some of the people in my community, I totally get that. Sun is shining outside. I have my vitamin D pills here. I'm fine. But the reason I want to talk about this is because it actually has an impact on the game. Usually, when it comes to drama, I leave myself out of it because it revolves around people's egos. It revolves around stuff that I don't understand. There's always context missing inside those DMs. But when it comes to TFT, this is of public interest. And while some of you guys have kind of stopped using it or kind of like didn't track how big this private Discord grew, over the last years, this has grown to having 500,000 members. Now, if you've never used TFT, TFT is a private Discord, just 500,000 people, no biggie. That is basically used for bulk trading. It is used for mirror services and is also used for other services, for example, Ashling. What TFT has been over the last few years is the same thing that PoE.trade used to be back in the day. If you guys don't know, PoE.trade was basically a website where people traded. It was almost a carbon copy of what GG made afterwards. But what it was is a trading website because GG did not want to make a trading website. It took them years to actually implement one of their own. So some community members took it into their own hand. And it took some RMT ads on the website that, as far as I know, the owner wasn't really responsible for. You can't really pick and choose your ads all that well. But what I understand from is it had to come to a certain point of outrage for GG to actually do something about that. And I think that bubble might be about to burst for TFT as well. Now, what a ton of people use here is the bulk selling section. The biggest one probably being something like compasses, just stuff that you cannot really bulk sell on the official trade website. Also very important, for example, beasts. Now, for certain things, it is more valuable than other things. Some things are just very niche or already get kind of covered by the trading website, but not perfectly. But there are some things where just you save so much time. It is incredible, especially with something like compasses recently. And also the introduction of PoE Stack, which is sort of like a trading tool connected with TFT, where basically you can look up all the things that were posted on TFT and you can have it in this website style, which is a lot easier to get through. Now, this website also has another part, which I'm not part of, which is the so-called mirror mafia, where people basically just have a ton of mirrored items and they get serviced out to other people, just make it more convenient. It sort of is a monopoly on that, although people try to break it, yada, yada, yada. It's a long story. When it comes to the mirror item community, I'm just not equipped to adequately represent them. There's a lot of other people who can do that way better than I can, but just know that there is a ton of in-game currency to be made, and obviously the accusations of RMT have been overwhelming. A little more on that later, but let's start with how this all began. Now, as far as I know, this is where this all started, with a certain person having a that which was taken jewel up for a certain price, but they got messaged by Genebu, which is one of the owners of TFT, and they don't necessarily agree with their antics, or they didn't like the person. I don't know the personal history of them. And this person didn't want to sell to Genebu. So whatever is the history there, or he didn't want to get spammed, I have no idea, but they basically knew each other, or he knew of Genebu. And yeah, so just kind of escalated and both sides were kind of unhinged. It's all fine. There's more stuff to be found here, obviously, but that is where it all started. And what happened is Genebu banned that person. Now, moving forward, as fast as we can, we come to the Armageddon event, which was TFT banning local identity. Now, as far as I know, local identity criticized that sort of behavior, that sort of banning, as a lot of us did over the last couple of months. And if you don't know, TFT is very ban friendly. Now, local identity is the creator of PoE Fork, which is a beloved community figure. So you have one of the most beloved people in the community, which makes the program that I spent more time on than in PoE itself. And on the other hand, you have a, let's just say, trading Discord with not the best reputation. Local identity criticizes for stuff like this and gets instantly banned and posted to Twitter, and the landmine explodes. On top of that, one of the problems is that immediately Genebu went to be personal about this and called him garbage, which he did later apologize for, but it is a pattern at this point. It is not just a single occurrence. One small thing I want to point out that I just cannot get out of my head. So you have Genebu, who probably does like thousands of trades every day. For all I know, this guy like trades while he sleeps, and he bans somebody for relisting an item for more, and he says that's bannable. I have not had, I think, a single day in this game without trying to whisper somebody and them immediately relisting it for more. So to think that this guy, who does thousands of trades more per day than me, this should be like second nature for him. So I have no idea how this even started in the first place. Sure, the guy was rude and all of that, but as a trader, you should expect that as well. You can't just ban everybody. As a trader, you're somebody who interacts with other people. You're gonna get shit on all the time. That is just kind of like a normal thing. Now, what happens from here? Well, it's the typical Streisand effect where you try to conceal something and people are just going to get more and more interested about what's going on. And a small thing turns into something crazy. Local identity gets banned. People like the Drama Cat and QDog see the dollar signs and it's on. And from here, we basically have everybody sharing their negative stories about TFT. Yada, yada, yada. I could sit here forever. And I'm sure somebody is going to take this topic and make a documentary about it. But that is all you need to know as a normal consumer. So what is the problem with this? PoE has a lot of need for third-party websites. It's a very complex game. So where GGG cannot deliver, people in the community will. Now, there are some sectors where things like what just happened isn't that big of a deal, right? It doesn't really affect you. If the Craft of Exile guy or the PoE Ninja guy all of a sudden went rogue or something, nothing would really happen. Somebody would take their place, or we would lose some information tool, right? That's what this is. Information, PoE Wiki, Craft of Exile, PoE Ninja, Awaken PoE Trade. It could kind of be utility, but whatever. PoE Lab. Those kind of things are important. They're so good to have, but they are not going to ever negatively impact your game. Same with the second category, which is utility, which, for example, would be PoB or Filterblade. These things can give you upsides, but cannot really ever diminish your gaming experience, right? You have PoB, which is, I mean, I don't even know how you would play the game. It would be so much testing involved. It's so hard to compare builds without it. It's a great tool. I don't know what we would do without it, but if we didn't have it, it wouldn't make the game worse from its base state. Same is true with Filterblade. Now, in terms of GGG getting involved in policing any of these websites, when it comes to information, I mean, they do make an effort with PoE Wiki sometimes. They do probably work together with some of these people, but in general, this is just a nice upgrade to the game. It's just very nice to have. When it comes to utility, these are actually even more important because, as I said, being able to make your builds with complex math, it's a big time saver. The game is very complex. Putting all of that into one place is huge. Same with Filterblade, because the filter that is provided by GGG is just so outrageously bad that it just makes stuff like this very important. And for people who don't want to go into the editor, like just the fact that it's now on a website just made it way more accessible to people. But in general, they would not have to police this if they didn't want to, because it doesn't make the game worse per se. Now let's go to trade. And I know that most people trade with PoE Stack, but that is basically TFT because it pulls from TFT. It just makes things a lot easier. If PoE Stack was a standalone, that would be, I mean, great. And maybe we're going to see that in the future, who knows? But when it comes to trade, TFT is the bulk of it. I cannot stress this enough. 500,000 people. This is something that concerns most people. It is not just mirror crafters. It is not just the mirror mafia that people are talking about. It is just the whole trading economy at stake. Now, some of the people in these communities are so terminally online that, for example, people like me would look normal next to. And that is okay, right? But there are some people in there that are really socially inept, and there are egos involved. All those things I do not care. I do not care about any of this. But when it affects the game, I do. Once this ego stuff affects my enjoyment of the game, I will cry to GGG like a little bit. Now, believe it or not, but when it comes to the player base in GGG, mostly our goals are aligned, which is making a good game. We have different reasons for it. For us, it's because we want to play it, and for them, it's because they want to make money. Obviously, they also want to make a great game. They want to have something to show off for. They want to feel good about it. They want to have feedback. But at the end of the day, it's also a vehicle to make money, obviously. But underneath that, GGG wants to honestly just make a good game for everybody. And that's what we want as well. Now, obviously, there is always going to be friction because GG wants to sell you stuff, for example, stash tabs. So they won't make it too easy that you can hoard stuff in your stash. They want to incentivize you to spend money. They will make your characters look like shit, right? You have a bucket on your head, so you buy a cosmetics. Sure. But overall, I can safely say I trust in GG to have a good vision of the game and to make good changes on average. Sure, sometimes there's problems, but we just poke them and over time it will go away. But when it comes to TFT and the player base, our goals are not aligned. Now, we're going to not even talk about all the RMT accusations, right, that have been coming out over the years. Obviously, there's a lot more drama preceding this. If you think this is like a one-off, It's definitely not. But what do we want? They care about having the trading experience in a place where they can control it. And I don't want to be unfair here. There's a lot of guilds who do this. There's a lot of people. But we'll once again go to this number right here. This is just the biggest culprit out of all of them. And this is where it kind of becomes a problem. And just to be clear, I'm talking about TFT in terms of management and as an entity, and less about the individual people. I know there's going to be good people in there. Some people deeply care about the game. And it is unfortunate that everybody will get put into the same category. And this is where you sometimes have to say something and bring it to people's attention. You don't have to build a new trading Discord. You don't have to take it into their own hands. You just have to do this to GGG and tell them there's something happening. And with GGG, when it comes to these personal disputes, which in this case, it's not even personal anymore. This is a systematic problem. But when it comes to GGG, rightfully so, they ignore 99% of this stuff, as they should. Personal disputes are completely bullshit. Like, why would they talk as, oh, somebody got scammed in a boss carry? How does that affect GGG? You got into a contract with the guy you shouldn't have trusted. Okay, it sucks, right? That guy is a scumbag. But, I mean, you can send GG a message. Okay, cool. But they're not going to intervene, right? That is a personal thing. But when it comes to these kind of things, at a certain point, there's going to be a threshold where the temperature gets too high and GG is actually going to respond. Is that time now? I have no idea. I just know that over the last few years, we have been basically just ignoring what's going on. These things have always happened. There's always some stuff going on with TFT, and we just put it on the side. Why? Because of convenience. Because as customers, we mostly care about convenience. And I don't think that is necessarily a problem. Sure, we could have said something earlier. We did, but it wasn't outrage enough yet. And honestly, I think this is something that is on GGG to fix. I don't think they should completely ignore this, even as a company. Now, at this point, I quickly want to talk about the crafting community and their involvement here, and especially people servicing Mira items that are very much interested in TFT getting broken up. Some people obviously involved, but a lot of people on the outside are kind of looking in and thinking this is a problem. Now, a lot of people say this is not an issue because it only really involves the top 0.1%. And while that is true, this league has seen a lot more people engaging with mirrored items. There's a ton of people who tell me they just mirrored their first item. They just found their first mirror and stuff like that. But on top of that, you have to understand that these people are probably among the most dedicated players. They have the most play hours, which basically makes them powerful, unpaid marketing agents. Unpaid in this case, sure, if they make content right on YouTube, but it doesn't cost GG a dime. These are the people who start communities, who have people coming back 2 months into the league because they know certain other people in their guild. Those kind of people. These 0.1%ers for GGG, not talking about money, but just in terms of community building and game growth, are very, very important. And if you care about the longevity of the game, then this can also affect you. Not saying you should give a damn. I'm just giving you the perspective. But as I said, I'm in no way qualified to talk in depth about what's going on, the inner workings of TFT or anything like that. I am basically concerned with everything here that TFT provides that if went away tomorrow, if I get banned tomorrow, would go away for me as well and for you as well if you type the wrong emote on their Discord. Now, next up, let's talk about bans. Yesterday, a lot of people have been banned. Prominent streamers, also a lot of people in their community. And this has been known for a while, right? TFT is known for banning people for basically nothing, or for personal insults, or for posting something on another private Discord to have their little spies, right? It's kind of crazy. It's a big ego trip. Now, as a streamer, to an extent, I can empathize with that, right? There's people who come into your chat, they talk shit, and you ban them. And people are like, why did you ban that guy? He didn't say that bad thing. And you're like, well, if that's his first message, the vibe he's going to bring in here is probably not going to be good overall. I totally get that. And then maybe they just had a bad day. They ask for an unban and you're like, sure, of course. But there is a difference here. If I ban somebody from my stream, they can still watch my stream. Also, nobody gives a fuck if they're banned. There's 100 other streamers. But TFT is a website that is currently irreplaceable. And this is where, yes, this is a private Discord still. It's a private space. But as we've seen with, for example, social media websites where people are posting their thoughts, and if they get banned, they do not have a voice. There are problems with this. Not being able to participate in probably the biggest public space is a problem and should be a problem. And sure, you could say it's kind of unfair because they just kind of grew over time. And it's just a downside because now they're not really private anymore. But they also got so much influence. So people should care, even though it's a private Discord. This is not an argument against this. It should be managed properly. And that is not happening right now. There is a lot of emotions running wild. There's people having erratical behavior. And that is not a good place to be in these corporate structures, believe it or not. You can talk about companies, you can talk about discords and laugh it off, right? But this is a big influential thing inside this game. And I think the main issue is, besides personal qualms and people being assholes, it's just too big to handle. In order to handle this many people without fucking up constantly, you need trained staff. You need people who can calmly assess situations and put personal qualms aside. This is not about legality. This is about public use cases. If untrained people hold too much power and start intimidating and doxing and hate rating people, that is a problem. This is a size that is so freakish that even if you're somebody who's like, it's just pixels, you cannot ignore. Now, harassment and stuff like that aside, I don't think anybody has to get banned here per se. I think the most important thing is GGG implements changes that makes TFT less necessary. With size comes influence, and with influence comes responsibility. And if that responsibility is not taken seriously, then somebody has to intervene. And I don't think there has to be anything direct happening, because I don't think GGG should meddle in any of those things directly. However, I do think they should make their trade website better to not make this as necessary. Now, I will not be talking about any like magical Christmas land solutions that I know GGG can never implement or doesn't want to implement or is too much work. I will just hone in on the most important things that could literally happen overnight. Before we even start, this is something that should be more pronounced to people. If you do group by seller yes here, and you, for example, want a set of a certain item and you just want to buy from one person, you can search this and you will actually see people who have posted multiple of these. So it's not as perfect as buying on TFT and buying sets, but it is something. And while that works for certain things, for others, it doesn't. Now, the biggest thing is probably compasses. PoE Stack right now allows you to trade compasses. However, it is reliable once again on TFT. I do not see why this cannot be stackable. I understand it has uses, some things that have different uses. For example, this is a 3, right? If you spec into a node on a passive tree, it's a 4. Sorry, this one. Just make them stack independently, like for example, you do with incubators that have different item levels. Now then we have beasts, which is probably the second biggest use case, and I mean the biggest use case for crafters for sure. Yellow beasts are pain to buy without TFT. It's not even about the red beast. The red beasts are obviously hard to buy, but the yellow beasts are almost impossible to an extent where you might as well just crack open some white maps. And I don't see why this cannot be on the trading website. Now, a lot of people have told me, pal, this is not possible because of, I don't know, these have different mods. They're not stackable. Clearly, they have different mods. But then I would ask you, why does it work with maps, for example? Because when it comes to maps, maps can also have different mods. And I can have rare maps here, unidentified maps, mirrored maps, and they're still all going to show up as the same. And I'm not a dev. I have nothing to do with this space, so maybe it is just impossible, and that's why. But I just cannot see why. After that, we have logbooks. Most people interact with logbooks in some capacity. Maybe they don't run them, but they farm them. And while they won't be stackable, and it's definitely a little bit more complicated because they have different areas, I don't think this is something you cannot fix. You can, for example, just make it search for areas like you do with maps. And sure, it's going to have another area, and you can't exactly maybe search for this, but at least you could search for bulk. This is probably the hardest one to implement, though. Next up, contracts blueprints, right? Blueprints have been basically now made into one mush, right? Everything has the same rewards. So I don't see any problem why it couldn't be just thrown in as blueprints. You can do different areas, but who cares, right? Contracts, the same thing. I don't understand why I can't just buy 100 deception. Now, when it comes to betrayal, we have Ashling, we have Varichi, we have Hillock, and all of that stuff. And I honestly can't see why this wouldn't just be itemized as sort of a currency at the end that's just in a chest like everything else. I guess you would have to make artwork for it and stuff like that. And it is a, I don't know, a process, but I mean, you were able to do fracturing orbs, right? We know that you care. We know that you can do it. And I think betrayal stuff will actually affect a lot more people than fracturing orbs. But yeah, either way. After that, we have influence maps. Right now, you can only search for shaper maps because they have a unique layout. So for some reason, that is possible. But then when we get to maps and we're looking at, for example, Elder maps, sure, they have different layouts, but I don't understand why they cannot be grouped by influence by the Elder, for example. And I should put this in the same category as, for example, Blighted maps, because most people do not care what kind of layout you give them. Sure, there are strats where the influence map matters because you're just using them as more quant, basically, but it would still be very helpful to at least have the most basic search function. And I know this is work on their part, but I think this is the closest we can get to at least eliminate the most important things for 99% of the people. And everything else that is more niche, like, I don't know, you want 8 mod maps that have +2 proj and you want to buy them in bulk. I think there is useful cases for these kind of websites. Like, there is always gonna be a use case for niche stuff. But I think, once again, the problem with TFT is the size, the influence, the intimidation that is happening right now. How people act differently just because they don't want to get banned on TFT. If we could just alleviate this, I think sites like TFT are fine. Personal squabbles aside, and I'm sure it started off at a good place. That is all okay. But at some point, it's just not scalable anymore. Putting these on the bulk trading website would reduce so much reliability on these third-party websites. I cannot see what is currently happening as a positive. I did not believe my eyes when I saw how many members there are currently. Last time I checked, which was years ago, obviously, but it was 67,000 members or something. It's just crazy. And it's a problem if it is ran by people who are untrained. Once again, it takes a lot to be able to moderate 500,000 people. What an absurd thing that a few people should be able to do. It's just not possible. And all the personal squabbles aside, this is something that will affect the whole community and is already affecting the whole community for the last years, whether you know it or not. It might affect you in the future. Now, I hope this video wasn't too drama for you. If you're on Twitch, if you're watching my stream or other people's streams, you will have heard these ideas 100,000 times. I'm sorry for that, but it just has to put out there also on YouTube. I think this is something that needs to get some attention, and I just hope that over time, GG will realize that the trading experience is very important and is something that makes PoE very unique. It is an integral part of the game, and they have been constantly doing small updates, but you can't just close your eyes to the bigger problems. You have to actually adjust some of this and not just copy PoE.trade from 7 years ago. But yeah, rant over. Peace.